Legal obligations is a combination of laws and acts that have to be followed by a coach to enable a safe environment for the performer. Legal obligations consist of many things. Abuse should be attempted to be spotted and then dealt with in the best way possible. Most organisations will have a procedure to follow. For example, a youth dancer turns up to rehearsal with suspicious bruises on her legs. The coach is most likely not trained to deal with abuse and therefore will have to report this. If the coach is located within a school or organisation, they will have a safeguarding officer that deals with the abuse and child protection. This does not mean that the coach cannot still act as a parenting figure towards their youth players. This is allowed. They just cannot act as counsellors, as they do not have the qualifications to do so. Acting as a responsible adult is often referred to acting in loco parentis, which is once translated from Latin reads, in place of a parent, which means they are allowed to give advice. Due to the coaches acting in the place of the parent, they have to be acting in a certain way. This is often classified as the code of conduct, which acts as a rule book to show coaches how to act and handle themselves. Another way that prevents coaches acting negatively in front of their performance is the DBS check. This stops criminals and potentially dangerous people from working in situations like coaching. An example is someone who is a convicted sex offender would not be able to work with a young hockey team. However, there are even more precautions that are taken once coaches are hired, an example being modes of transport. When a coach needs to get their players to their venues with their fixtures, they are not allowed to use their personal vehicles, and when with minors, most places ask for evidence of parental permission. There are also things that companies do to make sure that everyone is as safe as possible, like registers. This is extremely important when the coach has a number of performers. An example being a lacrosse team. There are other things, not just registers to prevent accidents, there are also supervision ratios. These are vital in sports such as swimming, where there is a high level of risk. There are also many acts that protect all sorts of different people. These are designed to stop negative acts from occurring. Insurance. Insurance is something that most businesses have, but there are 3 different types of insurance that are mainly used. There is public liability insurance, which covers compensation payments if a member of the public sues a business. Employer's liability insurance, which covers compensation payments if an employee tries to sue the business. And finally, business equipment insurance, which covers damage and loss sustained to the equipment. Different sports have different levels of risk. Sports such as ice hockey, skiing, boating, and weightlifting have a considerably higher risk of injury to the performer and instructors compared to sports such as table tennis, basketball, football, volleyball, and tennis. Public liability insurance is going to be needed in sports where there is a higher risk of the performer getting hurt, like mountain climbing or rock climbing, compared to sports such as swimming or walking football, where the performer has a much reduced chance of getting hurt. Employer's liability insurance is going to be needed in sports where there is more chance of the employees of the business getting hurt. A good example of this is in sports such as gymnastics, where lots of manual guidance is needed and the likelihood of an injury being sustained when teaching. Business equipment insurance will be needed in sports like racing and cycling, where the equipment is more expensive compared to table tennis, where the equipment is less expensive. Equal opportunities focuses on the coach making sure there is no discrimination towards minority groups. Minority groups that could be affected are gender, age, religion, ability, race, and socio-economic status. I'm just going to briefly explain what these forms actually mean and add an example of when this could happen. Gender is the identity you are born with. Discrimination towards gender can happen in sports that are primarily recognised as a specific gender role. For example, netball is mainly female dominated, and male netball teams are nearly unheard of. This means that if there was a group of males that wanted to set up a netball team, and people gave them abuse for this, then this is an example of gender discrimination. The abuse can come in any form, physical, verbal, mental, or emotional. Just because it's not physical does not mean that it is therefore not discrimination. Age can be something that causes discrimination, as there are certain expectations of what certain age groups can do. Most of these stem from safety precautions. An example of this is a young child will not be able to do weights. However, if there is no reason why a performer cannot take part in the sport, but they receive abuse for doing it due to their age, this would be discrimination. Religion shouldn't particularly influence the performer in doing sporting activities, other than a few key examples like swimming, possibly going against the ethics of a woman revealing skin. However, unless there are actual reasons as to why the performer cannot do the sport, everything should run as normal. If someone stops you or says you cannot do sport because of your religion, this is discrimination. An example is a participant is stopped from competing in javelin due to their beliefs. However, this has no influence on their performance whatsoever. Ability is often a key topic within sport. As sport has a very competitive nature, the better your ability, the better you will do in sport. However, mistreatment due to your ability is discrimination. If you are participating in netball and then you are verbally abused because you are not as good as the other players, this is not fair, and this can be classed as discrimination if this turns into a situation where your opportunities are reduced due to your ability. Race is a key topic in the media. It is one of the most known forms of discrimination, with many stories in the media relating to discrimination and abuse due to race. If an archery coach is doing a group session but only stops the one black person from joining, this is discrimination. Finally, socio-economic status can stop coaches from taking players on, even though this is discrimination. For example, a hockey coach avoids the poorer people at a hockey trial as they are aware that they will have to pay for the equipment. Media is a huge contribution to discrimination, as discrimination evolves around ideas that are not, for say, accepted. Therefore, we are combating discrimination by showing more of the less viewed things in the media. Discrimination is taking the idea that it's discriminated against and showing it as a more normal idea to counteract the negativity surrounding the idea. This can be in the form of showing more women playing rugby, showing more white men playing basketball, or showing more disabled playing badminton. There is also the Equality Act, which is enforced to stop any discriminatory behaviour. This means that instead of the minority groups being frowned upon, the actual discrimination that those groups are experiencing is now the aspect that is being frowned upon. Health and safety. There are many responsibilities that need to be upheld. Without doing this, there is a chance that the coach could be liable. There are many things that a coach should check, do, and be aware of before, during, and after sport. The coach should check the facilities to make sure they are appropriate for the sport and performers. For example, javelin cannot be performed in a gym, as this would be unsafe because the javelin may bounce off the walls and hit someone. Therefore, it's reason like this why the coach should make sure the facilities are appropriate. However, the most common thing to check for is when the sport is played on a field, especially if the field is public. The coach should check for things like glass, which can be dangerous and hidden in the grass. Another thing that must be checked before the sport should be played is equipment. However, this must be done before anything starts, and some sports have more risks involved. For example, sports like Formula One have to be thoroughly checked in case of failures within the cars. Equipment in this scenario, if failure were to occur, there is a much higher risk factor, but all sports should have correctly built and working equipment to prevent injury. The weather is a hazard that needs to be accounted for, as it can make the environment dangerous for the performer to deal with. An example could be a rowing event. If there is a high amount of wind, then the water will be rougher and potentially more dangerous. Also, any outdoor activities that involve water cannot be done if there is risk of lightning. However, a common aspect of weather that is overlooked is the sun. If there is a risk of high levels of UV rays, this means that the coach should make sure the performers have sun cream. Risk assessment should be taken before any activity in sport, and in many cases it is an obligation of the coach to do a risk assessment before the performer takes part in any sport. An example is before taking part in rock climbing, a risk assessment is taken to make sure that all scenarios are accounted for, like slips and trips. Another aspect of health and safety is making sure the athlete is using the correct technique. This is vital in sports such as gymnastics and trampolining, where injuries can occur extremely easily if correct technique is not followed. The coach should consider the athlete before allowing the athlete to perform in the sport. There is different conditions of the athlete. This is things such as gender, age, and disability. For example, an 11-year-old girl would not be able to lift heavy weights due to the developing bones compared to a 25-year-old male, which is much more able in this category. Another aspect is the coach should be alert, looking for any signs of abuse. Also, this means that the coach shouldn't abuse the performers themselves. This could mean in a sport like swimming, where the more skin is revealed, the coach spots some suspicious bruises on the performer. This means they now have to report this. Spatial awareness is something that is necessary for health and safety, as the space needs to be suitable for the performers. For example, pole vault cannot be done in a corridor. There needs to be an appropriate amount of room to make sure that the performer will not get hurt. Legal guidelines must be followed to ensure health and safety. An example of a legal guideline that must be followed is supervision ratios. There must be a certain number of supervisors to the number of participants. An example of this is whitewater rafting. There has to be a certain number of experienced riders compared to the participants. Warm-ups and cool-downs should be considered if the coach is running a training session. A warm-up is needed as it raises your pulse, which pumps red blood cells around your body, which carries oxygen. This allows the muscles to work, and a cool-down is used to prevent lactic acid build-up, which can lead to delayed onset of muscle soreness and cramps. A coach should make sure their performers are hydrated, as when their performers are not hydrated, their blood will thicken, meaning blood will not be pumped around the body fast enough to deliver oxygen, which can result in oxygen debt. If the blood is too thick, it can also lead to high blood pressure, which can cause strokes and heart attacks. Jewelry should be removed before playing any sport. A common example of when jewelry can become a serious hazard is trampolining, especially if you have piercings. The small squares in the trampoline mean when you land, your piercings will go down through the gap, but then they may get caught on the way back up. This would rip the piercings from your body. Evaluation should be done. Many situations change. A coach may book a gym to do netball, and there are vaults and crash mats all over the gym. The responsibility of the coach is to assess the situation and make sure it's still okay to perform in. Chlorine level in pools is an example of a sport-specific factor that needs to be assessed by the coach to make sure that it is suitable to perform in.